between 1335 and 1601, a number of canals were built in the basin. Why were they building canals? They needed to drain water. Why did they need to drain water? There had to be more water flowing than they had previously. And so we think that this period here, when they're building all of these canals, is associated with the period of the Little Ice Age. If you look at records throughout Northern Europe, there's a period describing flooded forests and reforestation that began in the 14th century and continued through the 16th century. So, we feel fairly confident when we look at this that not only do we see increases in the alder there, let me back up once, but we see also increases in all of our trees. These are oaks, hornbeam, beech, elms, walnut, ash. All of our tree types are more common during this period than before or after. So, what we think we see here is the period of reforestation following the plague associated with the Little Ice Age. We have a very good record of floods that go through Rome. Here's the watershed of the Velino River here. It's one of the major watersheds flowing into the Tiber. Here's the Rieti Basin. Here are our lakes. Okay? So this is a record of floods through Rome. And if we look at the number of major floods per century, when we get to the 14th century, we begin to see an increase. And in the 15th century, we have a maximum. So there's good evidence for a lot of water flowing through this area during this time period. And so when we see that shift in our own record, right here, that goes from very little alder and not so many trees to many trees and lots of alder, we think that we're seeing the initiation of that. And so, for the moment, we are suggesting that this period here is the Renaissance period from the 14th to the 17th century. The exact years we can't place yet, but we feel fairly comfortable with the timing of that. Now, if you come to the lower third of the diagram, what's interesting is there are fewer trees, and there is much more grass, much more Asteraceae, many more ferns, and a lot more pollen that we cannot identify. All of these suggest that it was a much more open landscape and a more deforested landscape. Nearly all of the historical records of the medieval period describe deforestation and increasing agriculture during the period of warmer climate. Okay? So, we think that this period represents medieval time, which then changed after the plague somewhere around 1350 to lead into a forested. So at the moment, while we don't know the exact ages of these time periods, we feel fairly comfortable saying that this lower section represents the medieval period before the 14th century. So we have a medieval period, a Renaissance period, and a modern period where we see very distinct changes in the vegetation from very few trees to many trees to then kind of a more modern situation. And that's what we'll go through now. Okay. If we actually plot our sedimentation rates, it's about 1 to 0.33 centimeters per year, or every centimeter represents between 1 and 3 years. This is very, very high sedimentation. This is this much sediment coming in possibly every year or every 2 or 3 years. So there's a huge amount of erosion here. We have some confidence that we think that this is also correct because other studies that have been done give similar types of sedimentation rates. So this is a basin where the erosion is at a tremendous rate and is coming down. Why is this valuable to us? Because we have very fast sedimentation rate. We can build a very high resolution record to try and then compare with the historical record for the actual changes in the environment in relation to human activity. So it's nearly the type of resolution you get with a tree ring. The problem is we have to figure out the ages still. So one of the reasons why this could probably have such high erosion rates is that there's quite a bit of forest clearing in the area, and it's very steep, and you get very intense rainfalls. So all of these things work together to suggest high sedimentation rates.